Thank you very much to those of you who've come along live to join the webinar, and also thank you to those of you who are watching the recording. It's great to have you present, and great to have you taking an interest in the topic. So what we're going to be covering this afternoon is we're going to be looking at some of the basics of the Australian financial system, specifically for international students who are studying in Australia. And this is being done by Financial Basics Foundation on behalf of Financial Basics Foundation for StudyAdelaide. And I'll introduce myself and who I am and what I do a little bit more in the next slide. So my name's Damien Nicholson. That's my happy smiling face there. My background is in education in Australia. So I've worked as a teacher of business, IT and English, and I've also been an administrator in those areas as well in the Queensland education system. I've since moved from the classroom into the role I'm in now, which is working with Financial Basics Foundation. I'll explain a little bit more of our charity as we get underway. And I'm now overseeing digital programs and development of resources, and also running sessions such as this. Before I go any further, though, there is one slide and one slide only that I actually need to read out during this entire presentation, and that's this one. So please just let me get that housekeeping out of the way. The information presented today by Financial Basics Foundation and myself is general education information. It is not financial advice. FBF staff, including me, are not financial advisors. The information is designed to improve your financial literacy by increasing your awareness and understanding of the topics described. Thank you for letting me go through that. Just very clear, we are not financial advisors, and what I'm going to be going through today is general information and from an education bent. So if you didn't get a chance to read through the description of the webinar, or it's been a little while since you signed up, the little blocks that are there are the topics that we're going to be covering today. And we'll go through each of those on their own and expand on them. By the end of it, each of those will have a little tick mark next to them. And just really importantly, because this wasn't in the description, just to make sure that you're aware of this coming in, I'll be talking about what we do and the free resources that we have available. But there are other resources out there that are excellent and specifically cater for your needs as an international student studying in Australia. And where it's relevant, I'll also point you in the direction of those. If you see something that's of interest to you, please do jump off and look at it during the session. I'd highly recommend that. So final little bit of housekeeping, just to let you know what underpins this. I mentioned that we are a financial literacy education charity. That's our background, and that's where we operate. But we have also, timely for this particular session, we've also just wrapped up a research piece with some university educators that specifically looks at young people such as yourself who are studying in Australia. And it looks at the experience and navigation of Australia's personal finance systems from the perspective of international students, especially. So when I talk about examples and case studies and stories that I can talk to in this session, it's actually being drawn from the experiences of the people who took part in that research piece, and it'll actually be available on our website shortly for anyone who's interested. You're getting a sneak peek at it because it was relevant to this session and this presentation, so the information will come through. It hasn't actually been made available to the wider public yet. So on to the session that we're here for today. And the first main topic that we're going to cover, again, drawing out of what was in that research piece, is looking at Australia's banking system and the basics of that. Please keep in mind as we're covering each of these topics, I'm going to look at them in quite a light manner, because in the time that we've got for this webinar and the Q&A that follows, it is only time enough to look at them in quite an overarching view. And my aim is to give you as much information as I can without overwhelming you in the time we've got, and point you off to where you can find out more and where you can explore and action the things that you want to follow up on that are relevant to you in this session. If you signed up and only one of the elements that are in here is your real interest area or a couple, please just bear with me as I work through all of them. You only have to put up with each session for a few minutes, and then we'll be on to the next one, just because of the nature of the amount of information we have to cover, and what we discuss with StudyAdelaide would be the most beneficial for its members. So just to cover off some of those basics of the Australian financial system and banking. So the general terms that you'll see bandied around, in terms of types of bank accounts, The general ones that are mentioned and used by international students are transaction accounts, or sometimes known as everyday accounts, savings accounts, and student accounts. So transaction accounts are the ones that are used regularly for money to come in and out of, and generally wages and payments like rent and bills and groceries. Savings accounts are generally ones that have a higher interest rate, and I'll talk to what an interest rate is. If that terminology is unfamiliar to you, I will cover off that in this session as well. I don't want to get bogged down on that here. But there are some little things to look for with savings accounts to make sure that, when you go to some of the comparison sites and take action, if you're looking to do this stuff around improving the quality of your bank accounts, I'll show you some steps you can take to understand a little bit better what how they operate, and also to avoid some of the common pitfalls that were identified in that research piece that international students experience. And then there's also, for yourselves, not every member of the public gets access to these, but a lot of banking institutions have a student account of some kind or student products of some kind, and they are generally quite attractive to students because they have benefits like being fee-free and being low cost. So those are worth checking out as well when you're comparing your options, even with your existing bank. If you're just looking for little things you can tweak, or if you want to do a little bit more of a deep dive, there's some things that I'm going to cover here that will let you look at it in a little bit more detail. So to to take a step back and just look at some of the underpinning problems that uni students often experience when they're coming to navigate the Australian banking system, and their families, for those who come with families as well, just be aware that you don't have to use any one particular bank in Australia. And that includes just you personally. You could have accounts with as many different financial institutions as you would like. The reason I say that is because in that research piece that's just been wrapped up, many of the international students reported that they would found the choice of banks and finding out information they could trust a little bit overwhelming, and they would often go just with whatever Google said was the biggest bank in Australia, or the one that they saw the most advertising for, or the one that a friend or family member happened to use. And often that friend or family member went to that bank because of advertising that they saw, or what a friend or family member recommended to them as being the easiest option. The reason it's worth checking these out in more detail, and I can give you a personal example of this, is I recently changed over, as a result of doing this presentation, actually, I changed one of my savings accounts over. So when I investigated and was doing comparisons and making sure the links I was going to drop in this presentation and send through in the recording that's going to follow as well, I realized that the savings account that I was currently using had a change of its terms and conditions. So what used to be a really good interest rate, again, I'll explain what that interest rate and money earned means on a savings account in a few slides time. But just as a principle, so I found that it had dropped. They changed their conditions, and I wasn't depositing a minimum amount that they required every month to get the maximum benefit. So did some research, did some comparison, literally using the same site that I'm going to show you today, and I found that I changed all my funds in my savings account over to a new bank. Literally opened it up online, transferred it across, and for me, it was a more than tenfold benefit. The interest rate I was getting from the new bank that I went to was giving me more in 1 month than what my old bank was giving me on my savings over an entire year. So when I talk to this, it is not just international students who get affected, it's everybody who navigates the Australian financial system. But often people who are coming in internationally don't have that experience navigating the system and aren't even aware of the different options that they have, and can sometimes just get locked into what's familiar instead of what is potentially a better deal that can save or make them more money or give them better use of their money. So with what I'm talking about there, the comparison site that I've got a link to is this one. Um, Now, I'm going to point one thing out on this site. The reason I use it, and it's one that I suggest, is that it has a lot of institutions listed in there. These guys make their money by recommending products, so just do be aware of that they are really forward with it. They tell you when a product is promoted versus one that has just got their information listed. But please be aware, like these sites fund themselves by promoting a product that they hope you'll click to find out more and potentially open an account with. So that's just being completely transparent. And as a disclaimer, because it sometimes comes up as a question, Financial Basics Foundation has no commercial or sponsorship or any kind of business relationship with CanStar, for instance, as a comparison site. It's literally just one that works quite well in the day-to-day work that I do. So I'm suggesting it as one that you can check out. So this one here that I'm talking about is their little link that goes to savings accounts, and you've got a whole range of things that you can filter by that hopefully you'll understand a little bit better by the time we finish this session. I will come back to talking about that a little bit more soon. So to cover off some of the fundamental concepts, though, just again, stepping through the things that international students have identified as their major pain points, people like yourselves, is that they're not always aware or coming from a country or a culture or a background that is quite as digital as what Australia is. So it is pretty much stock standard across the board in almost all instances in Australia for online banking and apps to be the norm. Most places that you make purchases in Australia will have some kind of PayWave or tap and go payment system with the ability to take either plastic cards or if you've got them loaded into your phone, the cards for payment. There is still physical cash in use and it is still reasonably popular. But what international students have found is that the way they often operate in the Australian financial system, they don't often handle cash. And again, I'm being general because I can't talk to your particular instance. I can only talk to what we have the ability to lean on and from our extremely recent research piece. So what this was really striking for a number of international students coming from countries where cash is king and is the prevalent form of currency and payment was a real like culture shock in terms of coming to Australia and not always operating with everything with cash and having to get their head around a little bit of the importance of making sure, for instance, they either have a digital or a physical version of their debit or whatever preferred card, some of them credit card payment system they wanted to use in Australia. So other things that trip people up around the banking system and that they got confused with, and this I can say from experience, doesn't just trip up international students, it trips up Australian students as well. And from my background in education, I've also got my oldest daughter who is a uni student as well. So there's some stories and experience that I can draw on for what I'm going to talk about today from that situation and that personal connection I've got to this as well. So what will often become a little bit concerning as the overwhelming amount of information is hitting international students is the question about tax file number comes up all the time. So a tax file number in Australia is a unique identifier that the Australian Taxation Office, I know these acronyms are a lot. I will do my best to demystify them and not use too many, but they are all throughout the financial topics in Australia. So you as an international student can apply for one of those. It's not just for Australian residents. The caveat though they have on the ATO website is that you apply for one of those after you arrive in Australia and get through customs. So you can get that same identifier to participate in the financial systems as closely as possible as you can to an Australian resident. It's not compulsory to get one of those, but it's often recommended, and this is recommended by a lot of university student bodies as well. They encourage international students to get a tax file number because some banks will require you to have one before you open a bank account. And if you don't have one, then banks will withhold a higher amount of tax on your interest, and also you'll pay a higher amount of interest on any money you earn in Australia. So it's definitely something that is worth investigating. Again, not financial advice, not a financial advisor. Just passing along information that we have on hand from both students, universities, and government agencies as well. Some other terms, because I said I would just demystify some of these to help contextualize the things I was talking about and show you the comparison site one more time. So other things that'll come up when you're navigating the banking system is in order to have a unique identifier of you and your bank accounts so that money can go in and out, Australia uses a combination of what's called a BSB and an account number. So the combination of those two things will identify you individually. And if you have more than one bank account, it will identify each of your individual bank accounts. So for instance, one of the most common uses of those, yep, I just saw a question come up. I will absolutely cover that tax-free threshold question. For those of you watching the recording, a question has just come into the chat, but I will absolutely cover that question in the tax section. It's a great one, and it's a frequently asked one for Australian students as well as international students. So, yeah, account numbers that individual identify your accounts. The most common way that's used for money coming in is part-time job, casual job, getting paid for that. And also often, depending on your living situation, quite a few places in Australia, especially uni student accommodations, will require what they call a direct debit, like a direct transfer of funds from a bank account. Not all of them will accept things like credit cards as payment for your food, rent, board, etc. So just aware of that term. That's really all it is, demystifying the terminology. The interest rate reference is always worth checking in any product that has it in Australia. So it's talking really about, in terms of savings, it's the percentage of benefit you get that will help your savings grow. And when it's talking about debt that has a percentage attached to it or interest rate attached to it, it's how much that debt costs or how much that debt might grow if left unattended. But we'll also cover debt in detail as well. And then the other thing that I'm going to flip to CanStar and point out to you with things to look at is a lot of financial products have fees, both overt and covert, so that they talk about, and also some that they hide or try and sneak in. And one of the big ones is if you're coming from overseas and you have overseas cards, American Express is one of the most common ones that students run into issues with. Some of those cards have really exorbitant fees and expenses to use in Australia, just because of the way different financial institutions are set up. I have no control over that. I couldn't even begin to try and pick apart to tell you why that is. It is just the case. Whereas others, they'll have a charge attached if you try and withdraw physical cash. Most of them will have some sort of, a lot of them will have some sort of account keeping fee. Again, both advertised or hidden. And it's also where I was talking about, look at the options you have for student accounts. They're always worth looking at because banks are always keen to attract students as customers, because whether they're international, domestic, it gives them a higher chance of keeping them long term as a customer in their system. Now, I did say I'm going to flick back to CanStar. I'm just going to do one more element here, and then I'm going to jump back over to the CanStar side of things just to show you what some of those terms mean. So just looking at what we're doing here, what we've already covered and what we will continue to cover. So the three biggest things that were reported to us that I can cover here today from international students was some of those confusing banking terms. And please feel free to keep your questions coming in chat. Being unsure about which bank to choose or whether they just had to be locked into one institution, and also those overseas cards. So I've covered some or all of those, and I'll also cover some in more detail as well. The other thing to note, and this is stuff that we're sort of just starting to compile in terms of how we can help people based on that research report. But one of the big things to be aware of, that when you are navigating this Australian financial landscape and you're working with banks, is generally the banks are really keen to get you as a customer. So they're more than willing and happy to talk to you, engage you in conversation. So don't be afraid to ask questions, whether that's banks or another body that you're reaching out to that is like one of those government agencies or somewhere reputable. They will generally be more than happy to help you because they've got a vested interest in the more people they help, the more hopefully for them is what they're aiming for is to create new customers. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. You'll generally find that people are really happy to speak with you and answer you. And at the end of the day, you always have complete control over what you do with your money. So you could talk to as many as you would like. Make sure you check out those student-friendly options. And if you think you're running into any sort of problems, look for those supports and where you can get help earlier rather than later. But I will cover those when we get to the section about some of those common problems that students face. And I'll jump to that in more detail in just a moment. So I did promise I was going to come back to this CanStar thing and to look at the comparisons, for instance, with bank accounts. So the interest rate that I was talking about, like the potential benefit on your savings, that's some of the things that they have here that you can filter by and you can do with filters and with the rearranging of the the results that are in here based on your searches and based on your preferences. So you've got a whole range of things that you can play around with here. And I'm only going to do one because, again, this whole session isn't on banking and saving, and we are nearly about to move into the next section. So one thing to be aware of with this side of things when you're comparing is where I got caught out, and the reason I changed bank accounts is I had a bank account that had this interest rate that was, at one point it was fixed in place, and then they decided they were going to put this thing in this change of conditions that I had to deposit X number of thousands of dollars to actually get the benefit of that interest rate. So the bank essentially paying me for having my money there, for them to have it in their institution. So I got quite upset at that when I saw that the interest was next to nothing. I went and did my research through here. I went and compared these different options and looked through the different banks and the things that are available to me. I'm not going to point you towards what I chose because I don't want to give you any kind of, you know, guidance for a middle-aged guy with a family as opposed to a uni student in terms of where you should head. My suggestion is do use the research piece, do look at these comparison sites, do check out the different options and the little filters that are there and see what's available to you, that what might be best for you. And I also don't have access to any student accounts. So there's other things there that you might be able to check out that I can't, and I can't even show you those. So I did promise I'd circle back to the different things that are there. And, there's others that have these little conditions. So there's one that you have to have X amount of money every month has to go into the account. So they're those things I was talking to you about conditions and things to be aware of. Now, about finding help. So circling back to, we were talking about asking questions and getting support. There's plenty of reputable places you can go for support and help. The Australian government has a money website that is a really great source of general information for everybody that covers most topics. And it's generally a really good place to find reputable information that's not trying to sell you something and that you can then jump off to other areas to investigate it further. You've got your student support at your uni. I work with a number of uni student departments. They all have different names. You've also got the benefit of being part of the StudyAdelaide network, where you can reach out for guidance and support and to be pointed in different directions as well. You've got us, now that you know that we exist, Financial Basics Foundation. We're an independent charity. I did say I would talk more about us. So this is where I talk about it. So we're an independent charity that is funded by working with sponsors, and we maintain all of our own data and databases. So we are really fiercely independent because we offer support and we offer resources to help people on their financial literacy and capability journey as they learn about these things. And we have to keep that independence so that we can be trustworthy and reliable. So we actually have a whole set of resources on our website that is just tailored for young people, including this little holiday thing that's going on that I'll talk about at the end of the session. It's not critical at the moment, but our website accounts are free. You go, you sign up, you have free access to everything that's in that young person hub, including a whole heap of fact sheets and different little rules of thumb and financial lessons that are designed to make this stuff really easily memorable, instead of having to go to your phone and scroll and Google and go through all these processes to access information every time you want to make a decision or remember something. We try and keep it really straightforward and simple and make it with little messages that will jog your memory and make it easier to stick. So that's us. And you can find out more about us and how we do things on our website. The other thing that you can do is you can go to a physical bank branch or go to their official website and access their live chat. They've just about all got one, and they have them whether you're a member or not for most branches. Just do remember, if you do access that option, that the banks are generally trying to get you to come on board as a customer. They're not going to answer a lot of questions generally about other banks and products. They're going to talk to you about their products and why it would be so good if you come and bank with them. So just be aware of that. The physical stores are a great source of info, but it's a great source of info about that bank, as is their online chat app. You can talk to trusted peers if you have them, friends or family members, but just be aware that it's always worthwhile. This is coming from other international students. Double check that advice, because it may not always be the best fit for you. And then the big one for us that we strike for all students we work with is, please don't take at face value and rely on TikToks and Instagram reels and um, that form of unverified information for random advice from an online source. Please do actually do a little bit of checking. It's your money. It's potentially your identity. Make sure you keep it safe and do your due diligence. And then in terms of us on our YouTube channel, if you're looking for these sorts of resources, we have a whole bunch of videos tailored to students like yourselves that talk about getting your first job and understanding the banks and banking systems. And these are our little digital presenters, Mon and IQ, who can take you through that as well. And they're really short, sharp ways of getting this info. And that's on our YouTube channel at Financial Basics. Now, this is getting into the question about the tax-free threshold. If you don't mind, I will address the question. If you can just let me go through the general information of tax so that there's kind of a shared context and understanding for people who are coming in, and the section on tax is really what you want to know and understand a little bit better. Please just let me get through that, and then I will definitely cover the tax-free threshold. So in Australia, like most, well, I should say like most countries, in Australia, tax is money that's collected to pay for communal services. So some of the examples of where different tax funds are distributed to are things like roads, hospitals, and schools in Australia. For instance, like I've got a highway 2 minutes down the road that I have to use when I go into the Brisbane CBD for work. There's no way on earth I could pay for that myself. My taxes pay for that shared resource that we can all use. As one example. This is as detailed as I'll get about the different tax levels in Australia. It's not super relevant. It's really just contextualizing it. So there's 3 different levels that collect tax. There's federal, state, and then local. The main one for international students and really uni students in general are the income tax and GST, or goods and services tax. But specifically, and this is what we get most requested, is income tax, which is where the tax-free threshold question will sit. That's the one I'm going to most focus on here today. So to give kind of the bare bones, in Australia, we have what's called a progressive income tax system, so that when you are working and earning, you will fit into one of these what are called tax brackets. So each of those lines are a tax bracket. If you want to dig into them a bit more, there's a link on the PowerPoint, and it'll also be in the YouTube links that you can check it out. So you will fall somewhere into there. The top tax bracket is tax-free, and I'll also talk about that as well. So that will relate us to our tax-free threshold on one or more casual jobs as well. So when you pay this thing called income tax in Australia, it's on any money that you earn. And that's really important. And I've actually got a little section here talking about like sharing and gig economy stuff, because they're really common jobs and sources of income for all university students, including international students. But it's any money that you're earning is going to be part of your taxable income. But there's this thing that's going to be happening very shortly as our tax year winds up in the middle of the year. And that's going to be a tax return to potentially get a tax bill, which is not good, or money back from the tax department, which is really good. So to talk what is most specific to you guys is, in general senses, most university students who are working, international or otherwise, the majority of them earn money through some sort of job and being paid a wage. They get paid, and on that payment, they pay tax. So one of the best favors you can do yourself in the Australian system is you can actually keep track of certain things that are called tax deductions, which I'll show you. And there's really easy ways of doing that. And you can take advantage of those and things called exemptions, which is that tax-free threshold that the question is about, and hopefully minimize any wasted money going into potential tax bills or tax deficits that you could accrue. Pardon me if I stumble there a little bit. This is the section I have to be really careful how I talk about it to not go into the field of financial advice. So what the thing called a deduction is, to break it into simple terms, is if you have an expense that is related to your work and the Australian Taxation Office, or ATO, agrees that that is a work-related expense, or a charitable donation above generally $2, you can make a claim to reduce how much tax you should be paying. The other thing you can do is that there's amounts of income that you earn that should not be subject to taxation. And that's that thing called a tax-free threshold. Now, to answer the question that was in chat, you can only claim the tax-free threshold on one job. So even if you have 5 casual jobs or 5 jobs, you can only claim that tax-free threshold on one. There are some really specific rules around it, and you would genuinely need to either investigate it further yourself, or if it's really too confusing, look at maybe booking a little bit of time. It would cost you, but booking a bit of time with a financial planner or an accountant who could look at your exact situation and make sure you'll make or give you recommendations on what the best process and approach is to you. But in general terms, what is suggested, and this is coming from government agency suggestions, what is generally suggested is, if, for instance, if you have 2 jobs, you claim the tax-free threshold on the job that will earn the most money over the financial year. But the question was around like multiple casual jobs, and you definitely want to make sure you're claiming the tax-free threshold. Which one, if you're holding them all simultaneously, you should be claiming that on, I can't really answer that. But you definitely, advice from the people who do this for a living is claim the tax-free threshold because it's one of your legal exemptions. Claim it on one of the jobs that you have. So, and talking more about that tax-free threshold. So the tax-free threshold is that $18,200. That's okay. You're very welcome. So if you are earning and working and you earn more than, sorry, you are charged tax. So you look at your pay slip and there's tax coming out and you earn less than that 18,200. Please be aware that there are some agencies, the way that their payroll works, and my daughter's actually at one of those. The way their payroll works is that she still gets charged tax whether she will earn above 18,200 or not, but that money will automatically, any tax that's paid on that 18,200 will be returned to her when she files her tax return. So different places will handle it differently. And it's why it's really pertinent. And it's why the ATO says keep a record of all of your like pay slips and all of your receipts. The reason it's worth doing that is that you can then check back. And if you have to present it to someone like, say, an accountant because or the ATO because you don't think you're a bit worried an employer has ripped you off, the best thing that you can have is all of this documentation so that it can be checked and find out whether your concern is verified or an explanation given so that you can understand it. But yeah, keep your documentation. Most places give it digitally now, so it's very easy to file. Especially if it's just a simple matter of don't delete your digital pay slips. And a lot of places, including my workplace, have a little portal where you can access all of your payslips digitally as well. So talking about, I went through 2 things here that I said deductions and exemptions. So deductions are these things that you can keep a record of and claim back to say, hey, I paid my taxes, I paid this amount in tax, but here's a record of the things that I've got that I would like to claim as a tax deduction. Now, there's a couple of ways I can suggest to you that that you can do this. It is really critical for you that if you are looking to make this claim of a deduction, that you keep a record of all of those copies, digital or physical or both, of all of those work-related expenses. And generally, it pays to keep track of more rather than less. So if you're not sure if it's a work-related expense, especially if you use something like the ATO app, which is one of the ones that oh, no, that's not what I want. Where is it? I didn't open it up. My apologies. Let me open the ATO app up. Apologies for that one. Oh no, I did have it open. Sorry. So in the ATO app, there's I thought I had it in the App Store. There's an app that the ATO has where you can I use it. This one is one I can talk to because I use it. It's free. And I take photos of almost everything in that app to keep just in case it might be a deduction. And the reason I take a photo using the app is because when I get to the end of the financial year, if I've just left like a physical receipt in a folder, a lot of those receipts and invoices are done on one of those heat generated printouts, and over time they fade. So if you take a photo of it, even if the original fades, you've got a digital copy that you can use as part of your trying to claim back some deductions at tax time, which we will get to very shortly. But to show you, so these are the ones I'm talking about. When you are keeping your records, whether it's with, there's other apps out there as well that do this exact same thing. The benefit of the ATO app is that it's paid for by the federal government and it's free, and it's directly from the organisation that you submit your documents to, and handles all of that taxation. So what's really critical and where a lot of international students get tripped up, and so this is one I want to make sure I am very clear on, is a lot of places by default will spit out one of these things on. Oh, I just realized I wasn't on the slide. Sorry. A lot of places will spit out one of these things on the right here, which is like a record of the bank transaction, a record of that money spending that happened. But that's not a tax invoice. So the one on the left is a tax invoice. And so this is where it really pays in Australia just to ask, if you think it might be a work-related expense, can I have the tax invoice, please? And they will be able to print one of these out, and you'll see there's all this other extra info. So it doesn't just have the amount, it has these other things, and it tells you what the GST, so the goods and services tax on there, exactly what was paid for, where it was from, the business number of the business that had it, so that you purchased it from, the date. So just please, 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 if you're looking to keep like a thorough record of this and giving yourself the best chance of having a really smooth experience through things like your tax returns and getting potentially money back on your tax return, make sure that you get these. And if you get them digitally, save them there as well. And again, in that ATO app, you can use it to save those expenses also. I want to go to, my apologies for not having this page open. So just so you can see it, that in the app itself, I know that's not the best way to do it, but in the app itself, there's little sections there that, if you have travel for work, there's little things where you can record the mileage for your travel. So, the distance to and from, that's something that could potentially be claimed in your tax return as well. You can take photos of your receipts. You can store those in there. You can put little notes next to them about what that receipt was for if you potentially want to chase it up, or that it's one of those maybe items that maybe you'll be able to claim it, maybe not. You can make yourself a little note as to what it was for, so what you're spending that money on that day. It's a really simple free tool that you can use and that I do use. I've talked about all the elements that are there as well. I've talked about everything that's in there. The only one that I didn't mention is that it also connects to a government portal called MyGov, which is another Australian resource that international students can access. You just need to register for it. Your access is slightly different to what an Australian resident gets, but MyGov is a portal of government services that you might be connected with. It puts them all in one place, and it also connects up, and you'll be able to read more on this if you choose to do it. It connects up and gives you like a pathway to submitting your tax return yourself, if that's the way you want to do it. On to tax returns. So again, I'm working through these key questions that have been asked and covered as part of our work and our research piece. So please throw your other questions in the chat if you've got them. So in Australia, we have this financial year that runs a different period to the calendar year. So it actually goes from the 1st of July to the 31st of June. It's about to tick over. We're about to finish up one financial year. So this is where the tax stuff is really pertinent, and it was why it was one of the things that StudyAdelaide requested quite strongly as something that is constantly coming up from international students and being really timely with only a couple of weeks left in the financial year. So after the end of this month, so 31st of June, if you've worked or earned an income, you have to submit this thing called a tax return. In terms of you personally, so your employer will pay you. They're responsible for, in most instances, calculating the tax that you are paid. You're responsible for checking and being responsible for your own situation, but you're also responsible for tracking your spending and deductions. So what a lot of Aussies, particularly, will call it is tax time, or probably a few swear words thrown in there as well, for many of them. But when that rolls around, it's your chance when you put a tax return in, it's basically you saying to the ATO, hey, we've got a record of all of my earnings, but then here I need to bring to your attention, here's all these work-related expenses that I've had. Um, and the hope being that it will lower your taxable income. It'll mean that you get some of what you paid in tax back. So that's the end goal as a positive. And if it all goes well, then you get a tax refund. Fingers crossed for you on that front. In terms of how you do it, so there's really the two most common ways are to do it yourself. And there's a thing called My Tax, again, done by the ATO. I'm not going to go over to their website again. But you've got a feel for some of the things I've showed there that they have available. You can do it yourself. It's got this thing called My Tax. You go and follow all the prompts, enter all the information. It's free. You can do it anytime. You can do it online. If you do all of your account registrations, it actually talks to the ATO app as well that I mentioned earlier, that I said that there was a potential for a streamlined tax return process. The minuses for this, and this is reported to us by international students as well, is that it can be confusing and it can be overwhelming. There is a risk that you might miss a deduction that you could have claimed because you're not sure and you don't put it in, or you didn't even know that you could claim something as a tax deduction. Um, so you have to be aware of those pluses and minuses. But a lot of people do this way of doing their tax return. The other way is I'm just going to use the general term accountant. There are a number of different people who can do tax returns as a paid service in Australia, and the legitimate businesses that list all of the qualifications they have to do those returns. So if you do decide to engage the services of an expert to do your tax return, the plus side of that is you have someone that you can work through with who hopefully knows the ins and outs of your situation and the things that you can and can't claim as a tax deduction. And they will often ask guided questions to make sure that you've thought about it, considered all the things you might be able to claim as an expense, sorry, as a deduction that you've spent money on. So they do have pluses. Some people do it as like a really involved process with that specialist, either in person or online. Others literally just bundle everything up digitally or physically and send it in and let them sort it out. There's a whole spectrum of how people use these sorts of services. The downside of it is that they cost money and they usually require an appointment in person or online, especially if it's your first time working with them. That is information from these people, not from me. So that's information from accountants that I've spoken with. So regardless of how you do it, it's still on you to make sure you have that proof and that evidence. So the reason why I'm saying that the free ATO app is a really good way to do this is in most cases, you need to have this proof for up to 5 years, just in case the ATO decides to do what they call an audit and just check to make sure that everything that you said and did was above board. You may be planning on only being in Australia for a shorter period than that, but the time that you're here, you are still eligible to be audited. So please just make sure you consider how you might be able to keep that info. And it's also why I use, again, the ATO app, because it means that if my house burnt down, hope it doesn't, and I lost my physical records, I've got digital ones if I needed that proof. It's the easiest government provided free resource I can point you towards that kind of covers your bases. And then the thing that's in it for you, hopefully, is that you do your tax return and you get money back in the form of a tax return, which is hopefully bonus money that you can use for something positive. Now, I talked in general terms about earning an income. There's a couple of items here I really want to mention because you need to be quite aware of these if you're working in like the gig sharing economy. That some of these services will sort out and pay the taxes for you. Others actually put the burden of doing that on you. Not going into naming specific ones, but the general feedback I've received from uni students is they find it easier navigating services that do like a delivery of things as opposed to delivery of people. So that's uni student reports, not me. I haven't worked in that space. I'm passing along uni student feedback that once you are partaking in the sharing or gig economy and you're moving people around, especially like ride sharing services, there tends to be a lot more onus put on you. Again, their words, not mine, in terms of your requirements, especially around tax. But either like this is general info, so it's really worth having a look to see where you fit, where you sit, and what those services require. If that's something that you're looking into, if you're looking into that service or gig economy, and it is extremely popular with uni students, in fact, quite a few international and Australian uni students do deliveries to our place all the time. So I know it's extremely popular. Um, but just check out what you need to keep your records of, what you need to be doing in terms of, whether you should be putting some of your funds aside or whether there's a particular process you're meant to be following with the ATO around your tax. And the reason I say that is not to scare you off and not to be alarming, but if you're not aware of it and you don't do it, the flip side of getting a tax return, which is the great bonus, is you may end up facing a tax bill. And that is definitely not a good time. So being proactive and being informed, and if you're really worried, consider that paid service of a tax specialist just to put your mind at ease, to make those choices. Oh, and I forgot to mention, just going back, it's in the text, but just to say it to you as well, if you do decide to use a tax professional to complete your tax return, that's actually a deduction for the following year's tax, which of course is only going to be super relevant to you if you're going to be here for multiple years as an international student and working and earning and paying tax in the Australian system. So that's the end of the tax portion. Again, if you've got questions, please throw them in. If I've already moved past the section, so I've done banking and tax so far, please put them in. I'll cover those as we go through. The next section is on superannuation, and it's a shorter one. And the reason it's a shorter one is that not every international student stays long term in Australia for the purpose of superannuation and what it's geared towards. So in Australia, every country who has this sort of setup calls it something different generally, or a slightly different tweak on the name. In Australia, superannuation, or we call it generally super, you'll hear that phrase bandied around, is essentially compulsory money that is put aside during working life to set up that person for retirement. So obviously, if you're not looking at working and earning for that extended period in Australia, the context of your superannuation stuff that I'm going to talk to you about isn't really possibly for you the geared towards retirement. There's a slightly different bent, which I'll cover. But if you're an international student who is looking at potentially or possibly thinking about being here long term, there could well be some stuff here where you've got like a long term bent to it as well. But the big one that comes up, and I've actually spoken to a superannuation fund about this. Fortunate that we work with one quite regularly as one of our support partners. But their essentially summary to this question is uni student who is working and earning in Australia, when they finish studying, they're going to go home, leave Australia. Can they get access to that money that's in superannuation? And I'll talk about how that gets built up in this little section. But just if this is you and this is the burning question you've got, the short answer is yes, you can get access to that funds as an international student who's not staying in Australia, but you will need to contact your super fund, let them know this, and be prepared to work through the process to get that money back. Because it's not the primary purpose of how it's set up. There is a process for it to occur, but in their words, it is quite convoluted. So the earlier you can start, the better. And they also advise that for a uni student who might be in this situation, it is best that you do that process before you leave Australia while you're still physically in the country. So if that's you, file that information away and start doing that process when it becomes time. So the bare bones of super, if you're under 18 and work 30 hours plus, or you're over 18, your employer, and again, I'm talking in general terms, please don't start putting comments in the YouTube recording or comments in the chat about what I said earlier about some employers will put the onus of this on you in particular instances, especially like the gig economy. I'm talking in general terms here. So working and earning, your employer must pay that what's called a super guarantee, which I put for the next financial year because it's 2 weeks away, which is 12% in addition to your wages. So it's not 12% of your wages that you lose, it's what you earn, and it's an additional 12%. And this is why when I was saying before, like look at your payslip, check the amount you're paying in tax, and do a little bit of research if you think it's not, and get help if you think it's not quite right. Same goes for superannuation. Look at your payslip and do a little bit of research and ask for help if you think something's not quite right, because your employer should not be taking money away from you to put in super as just part of your normal employment conditions. It should be extra funds in addition into your super, that 12% of what you earn. And that goes directly into the superannuation fund. So when you're choosing a superannuation fund, I'm only going to skim over this quite lightly because if you're in that boat of leaving Australia, this isn't going to be super relevant, but it is worth being aware of, because if you're a uni student here for a short term, you do want to make sure that, for instance, be aware of the fees and charges and insurances that are included in your superannuation fund, because it could eat away at the money you could potentially be withdrawing. And then if you're looking to stay here long term, you want to make sure that you make the best choice for you on the superannuation fund for the longer term that you're here. So do check them out. Again, there is a number of websites that you can look at for this. CanStar does have a superannuation one as well, but the one that I generally suggest to people, and I'm just looking for where that is here. So the ATO has a thing called the Use Your Super comparison tool. It's a really simple looking version of what I showed you with what CanStar has. No one pays to be here. It just lists all of the superannuation funds in Australia, and you can go through and it gives you little explanations about, which is why I'm not going to dig into these too much, about what different things mean. And you can look at the different performances of those funds and the fees and charges and inclusions to decide, for your situation, which is going to be very different to mine, what's going to be the best choice for you. And you can change it at any time as well. So just letting you know that that exists, it's worth checking out. And there's also comparison sites that I mentioned, like CanStar, that have some of those services that they promote as well. And again, you can pay for a financial specialist to have this conversation with you as well. But again, be aware you have to pay for that. But it is always an option. Now, things that can cost you money. This is whether you're an international student or an Australian student. If you have, coming back to that tax-free threshold, if you have multiple casual jobs and you've just been ticking boxes of like whatever default super fund your employer offers, you might have had 5 jobs in Australia and have 5 different super funds. And you might be paying for 5 different sets of insurances, or you might be paying for 5 different sets of fees and charges, which is all just going to eat away at that money that you've got there. You can bring all of your super funds into one, and from this point out, you tell whatever employer you have what your preferred superannuation fund is. And that just means, just like a bank account, you don't have to create a new bank account every time you start with a new employer. You don't have to create a new super fund every time you start with a new employer. And it's one of the big pitfalls and big mistakes that international students especially make, is filling out forms, ticking a box, and ending up with a whole bunch of different superannuation funds. And sometimes like they're really crummy, poorly performing funds when you look at that comparison site, and they might just do absolutely nothing for you. So, or they might not suit your particular situation or context of time of life. So please do take a little bit of time to make a choice. Even if you only do it once, it's better than not doing it at all. And just get yourself that superannuation fund that you use while you're in Australia. It'll, you'll thank me in the short term and yourself in the longer term as well, however long you choose to stay here. You can check the value of it in the Superannuation Funds app or that ATO app if you create that government account. Just as I mentioned before, you have a couple of different steps to, say, some of your Australian peers. Your experience of signing up for that MyGov portal might be a little bit different because you will have different things that they don't have, being an international student. Then there's a whole bunch of other info that you can get. We're putting together information to go on our website on super that young people can access. Teachers can currently get there, but that won't help you right now. And you've got your paid services too. So that's super. Moving into the next one, I know I'm working through stuff fairly quickly here, but there is a fair bit that I've been asked to cover. So a big issue that international students strike some strike in Australia is around credit and debt. So credit in Australia is literally this thing where it's a term of you can use someone else's money to buy now and pay it back later. Regardless of its type, that's what credit is. And it comes with like fees, charges, interest rates. There's a cost associated with it somewhere along the line. And then debt is money that you owe. So those are the sort of the key terms. The top three issues and uses of credit and debt that international students we've got experience are credit cards, Afterpay. I'm using Afterpay, but they're called deferred payment services. There's a whole heap of them, buy now, pay later, and personal loans, generally for study or a car. And all of them have a cost. Even if you've seen Afterpay ads that say they don't have a cost, they have a cost. So credit's the use of someone else's money. That's not really good or bad. It's what can potentially happen you need to be aware of. So I'm not going to give you like the big comparison sites here for this next little section. And I'm going to give you the chance to sort of look through in detail these case studies. I'm going to focus more on just some numbers here. So these are real case studies, not real names, but real case studies. So like for a credit card, there's a cost associated with it. This is where that interest rate I was talking about right at the beginning of the session came in. So on debt, interest rate is going to be what is charged on the amount that is owed. So if I go over to here, credit cards always have a minimum repayment. But if you just did something like the minimum repayment on this $2,000 at 19.74%, it's actually going to take 24 years to pay back. And there's going to be an absolutely astronomical amount of interest paid, $5,300 on $2,000 of spending. So that interest builds up really quickly. I saw the question about the superannuation balance. So the question was, would the superannuation balance go below zero if I stop working and fees keep getting monthly fees deducted? That's really a specific, like almost financial advice question. What I can say is generally, most super funds have checks and balances in place in 2025 so that it doesn't go below zero. I can't promise that of all of them. Again, not a financial advisor. And if you really want to know specifically that one, if you go to, I'm assuming if you've got multiple casual jobs, you'll have one or more super fund. Actually jump on the app, jump in the chat and point that question towards them because they'll be able to answer it exactly. And if you've got more than one super fund, just literally copy and paste it across to each of them. So yeah, the costs associated with credit, if it's not paid back on full and in time, adds up really quickly. And then for Afterpay, again, really heavily advertised, especially towards uni students as a target audience. So where they have a lot of funds build up is there's no cost to the user for using the service, but if you don't pay it all back on time, that's where the fees and charges tend to build up. So like 3 sets of Afterpay transactions, 3 different ones that can attract fees and charges if there's payments not made on time. And again, this is really for you to have a look at and be able to spend the time looking through the different sections that are here. I'm working through them quite quickly, but if we look at like the purchase amount here, and if there was just one payment missed on each of those deferred payments, it's already chunking up to be chunking, that's a bit of an Australianism I shouldn't have used. It's already building up to be a considerable percentage of the actual amount that was paid. So any of these services, you just need to be aware as you're going into it as a general advice, if you're using, or not advice, sorry, a general bit of information and knowledge. I mean, ideally, if you can, avoid the need to use them all together most of the time is a good little rule of thumb, but don't use it if you can't afford it, is a general rule of thumb that we put out there. If you can't afford it, don't use credit. And again, like a personal loan, a really common one for international students is around study and a car. I just did a car one here, whether that's a car just for transport or a lot of international students will enter into like the gig economy and services and delivery stuff with a car. So if it's not paid for up front, again, I'll put all the figures in there. These are all coming out of government calculators, but you can see in there that the cost of that credit builds up. So using those credits build up, and they mean that you have a larger amount of debt. So again, general rule is if you can't afford it, try not to use credit to pay for it. So students, coming back to you guys and particular potential problems with credit and debt, issues international students have experienced is getting and having multiple credit cards and using those, having more than one deferred payment service. I actually should have had these around the other way because this is a bigger issue. There's more checks and balances on multiple credit cards, especially in Australia, than there is on the deferred payment stuff. But having multiple of those and missing payments, and then starting to get into things like using a credit card to pay off the afterpay and creating this real big circle of debt. Spending money they don't have, which we're talking about by using credit rather than waiting and saving, which is a decision and a behavioral thing. Don't having a budget, using one form of credit to pay another, and then borrowing to buy things they don't need or can't afford. So I've mentioned only use credit if you can afford it. On our website, you'll see things like sleep on it as a rule of thumb. Spend less than you earn means don't blow out your budget and spend more money than what you got coming in. And ideally, don't use credit to buy things that lose value or groceries and clothes, petrol, etc. And finally, where we wrap up, I know we're still within our time frame. Please keep the questions coming in. I had a fair bit to cover here, which is why I asked for the extended meeting time. So thank you everyone who's borne with me this far live and also in the recording. So what we get with money management in general terms is a budget. And a budget is just a plan around money. And in simple terms, it's income, money coming in, expenses, money going out. And there's a whole range of different ways that you can do a budget. Like I know people who literally will sketch it out on a napkin or a scrap bit of paper or with a crayon. Like there's that all the way through to people who will allocate every single dollar through an app or a paid service or a spreadsheet. Or there's such a spectrum that it's really what I'm going to do is mention to you that there's a whole range of different ways to manage your money. I'm going to give you tips from people who are successful budgeters and what generally works, and encourage you to investigate some options to figure out what works best for you. So the first free resource to look at is whatever bank you're with, or banks if you're with multiple. Most of them have some sort of app that has a budgeting element to it. Check it out. It might be all you need. You might literally be able to do everything in there that you need to keep track of your income and expenses and make sure that you don't spend more than you earn and you're sorted. You might even be looking at your bank app right now. Another one is to look for a free budgeting tool. In this instance, one that you can connect all of your accounts into. So Frollo is a free Australian one, and you can give it permission to talk to all your different bank accounts. You have to do that manually and actually activate and give it permission. But once you do that, it will be able to see all of your different accounts, cards, etc. And it starts to use its AI and tech that sits behind it to help you do your money management and understand your spending, your income, your expenses, bills you've got coming in. It's designed to try and sort of automate the process in an app-centric way as much as possible. If that appeals to you, that might be the one to go for. You've got to have a think about and read about it a little bit and check out what appeals to you and then try it out and see if it works. The good bit about this and any of these reputable ones like it is you can also revoke that permission at any point. So if you decide it's not for you, you can go into Frollo and you can go into your bank apps and you can just tell it that you don't want to share that information anymore. These guys keep it free because it's like their flagship product they use to go and build other apps for corporates, and they have all that on their website. Another one, and this is just simple categories. So bank app as a category, a digital version as a category, and then like the dumb in air quotes spreadsheet as a category. There's a whole heap of templates available online. MoneySmart has one. That's their simple like spreadsheet template. They've got a web-based one, but it doesn't have a save function. So I'd suggest probably check out the spreadsheet version if you want to be able to save it and update it. But this might be what works for you. And they have all these just suggested categories for you to check out. Into the tips, and you may have already jumped off and gone, I'm checking out apps now. Go for it. I hope you find one that works well for you. So there's a range of these different ones that are around. I'm just suggesting one that's popular that you could consider. So one of the popular breakdowns of budgeting is the 40-30-20-10 rule. And that is 40% of your income or less goes towards your necessities, 30% or less towards fun spending, 20 to savings or paying off debt if you've got debt, and then 10% towards rainy day savings. And the aspect here I really think is worth pointing out is you work hard for your money, plan to have fun with it too. Like plan to spend it for something nice, but just successful budgeters do that responsibly so that they don't spend 100% of their money on the fun stuff and then be in serious trouble around their finances and debt. Um, and then there's things you can do to automate the process. Some people call it set and forget. I prefer set it so you don't forget, so you can automate your bills and payments, etc. Or savings. That's one of my favorites. Is that the money disappears from my account the day after I get paid, so I never see it. That our children's daycare goes into automatically goes to them. So there's things like that you can set up automatically. And on our YouTube channel, Mon and IQ can talk you through that in more detail. And if you're already off to the internet and on your phone, checking out these different things, and that's all you needed, great, tune me out for the next little bit. But if you really want to know some more of those budgeting tips, stay with me. When you're doing the budget, especially if you're doing like one of those more manual budgets, the budgeting tip is to do it the same time frame as you get paid. So if you get paid weekly, do a weekly budget. Fortnightly, do a fortnightly budget, and you can figure out the rest of that pattern. Make sure you're recording your income from all sources. It's quite popular for international students and uni students. Sorry, not popular, common to have multiple different sources of income and side gigs and hustles and things that they're doing on multiple casual jobs. Just make sure when you're doing your budget, keep track of all of it. And if it's like not super regular, just try and get an idea of an average so that you can have some sort of way of planning around your money. Record all your expenses, and, and, and this can be confronting, but it is worth doing, especially when you do see potential patterns. And some of those app-centric ones like Frollo will start flagging for you where money is going, so you can consider whether it's something that you really need. You can set it up to help or suggest things to you as much as you would like. But definitely keep that record so that you can then make really informed decisions on your money and your behavior around your money, as opposed to kind of just, potentially replicating the same mistakes over and over again, or feeling lost or helpless continually. This is a way of just sort of step-by-step methodically working through a plan. I've already mentioned have some fun with your money, but I think that's worth re-mentioning. That 30%, if you're following the 40, 30, 20, 10, just really do consider like, what do you want to do with that money? What can you do with it to have some fun and enjoy what you've done? And the other one is get rid of debt and set up your savings. I actually had one of my previous students who was then a uni student. He set up these little accounts and stuff when we were in year 9 business, and he just left it alone. So where he worked, he just kept on automating, like saving this money that he just put into a savings account. And he was telling me he was stoked because he ended up on a Canada ski trip with a group of friends when a couple broke up, and so they dropped out of the trip. And they were looking for someone to come and jump in. It cost several $1,000s to get over there for it. And he was able to stick his hand up and go, yep, I'm in. And he didn't know what he was saving for at that point. Not always ideal, but he was just going, look, I set it up. I had this savings money, never knew what it was for, but I could use it and access it. Other people will have a particular savings goal of, what am I looking to aim towards with that 20% or whatever percentage it might be of your income towards that saving. So just as a story of, a real world instance of, he never really knew what he was doing it for, but he thought it was a good idea. And then he was able to do something incredible with it and not have to go into debt or use a credit card or miss the experience. And then there's the rainy day money. And this is just as a behavior with budgeting. It's an idea of having money there just in case. So that could be, if you've got a car and that car could potentially be critical to your work and it blows a tire, it needs some repairs, you have this fund of money that is just always there just in case of an emergency or a busted phone or whatever your particular emergency is. One of the most common ones where I used to live was people replacing the hot water systems because the water quality degraded hot water systems, something fierce. So on 2 occasions, my wife and I were going to our emergency rainy day when our hot water system blew up. So these are just things that you have just in case. And then this is the end of it. So we've still got 20 minutes left and we're about to dip into the Q&A side of things. But the final section is around financial scams. And there are an increasing number of these, and there is quite a number of them that insidiously target international students and international visitors to Australia. So it's really worth being aware of them. And again, I'm not reading through all of it. A lot of this is just for reference for those who want to come back to it and spend a little bit more time than how quickly I've had to work through it today. But it's really worth being aware of some of these key what to look for when it comes to financial scams to hopefully avoid them, cut them off at the pass, or know what to do in the unfortunate instance that you do happen to get scammed. And it is really common to get scammed. So the ones I've got here, these are the most common ones that international students flagged with us in the last 12 months. So the most common being, especially this time of year, fake ATO calls or text messages, often with quite threatening language or a call to action that's trying to rush you into not thinking and acting. And really, really simple thing to remember there is the ATO is never going to contact you that way. Not that way with a phone call, not that way with a text message. So it's a scammer trying to prompt you into action. Another really common one is the fake bank emails or texts, sometimes phone calls, but more common digitally, where they're looking for you to hit their fake link that might even look like a real bank account portal, because they're looking to scam you out of your access and your funds. There's a lot of the too good to be true job ads or text messages, especially if you've listed yourself in places for different jobs or job alerts. I get these, and I'm not listed as looking for work anywhere, but I get these scam email text messages all the time, so I know that they're a scam. But a lot of them, there's a real spate of these in 2024 targeting international students, where it was basically money laundering operations that were this too good to be true job ad that was essentially, you're going to help us just transfer some money, and you get to keep a percentage of it. And there was quite a lot of people got caught up in that, and it's a really difficult position to be in because if you've literally been scammed into taking part in money laundering, that's a really difficult position to be in Australia. There's people who scam trying to sell stuff on social media, and it never arrives. So be careful and conscious of those, especially someone who won't let you physically meet up or see it in person. Raise some red flags. And then also the other common one being the fake delivery notices that want credit card information to confirm the delivery or for some other reason. But any real delivery service will not ask you for that information. Their notification is going to be that it's on its way, it'll be there soon. It's never about trying to scam you out of money or put their hand in your pocket for money to deliver your product. So some things to look for just generally, because scams are changing all the time. So this is just some things to be aware of and to watch out for. That sense of urgency, definitely watch out for that. If you're being asked for personal info, has poor grammar, or if it just feels off, this is the second slide I'm going to largely read to you. You're threatened with fines or arrest or jail time. You're told not to tell anyone, which should be a major red flag. It's a deal that feels too good to be true. Like, trust your instincts on that. And with all of these, if it feels off, don't act on it, because you always have the opportunity to look into it, to report it, to hang up the phone if you happen to, if they've just caught you and you've answered the phone. Take that moment to stop, to think, to protect yourself. And then this is just some more of that sort of, don't share those details, don't click on those links, always use the official apps and websites. You can talk to your bank, you can use strong passwords and two-factor authentications. If you're not sure what they are, please do Google those. It's not part of this presentation to dig into those. Excuse me, and you can report any scams that you're either aware of or get scammed yourself, to the Australian Government at Scamwatch. Now, the big one, if you've been scammed, first thing is don't panic. Now, I say this that, my mum has been scammed. It's not something that only happens to international students, or it only happens to you. And it's scary and it's confronting and it's an awful situation. But the biggest favor you can do yourself, and this is all sort of government recommended advice as well, is don't panic. Know you're not on your own. Know there's help available. Act on it straight. Don't panic doesn't mean do nothing. Act on it straight away. Call your bank. They can possibly stop the payment, or you can get into their process about reporting and dealing with the scam, change your passwords on another device and the affected accounts, report it to ScamWatch so that hopefully others don't get caught out by that scam. Reach out to your uni student support or StudyAdelaide, someone that you trust, for whatever that support process is you need, or maybe just a bit of guidance because you're really caught up in that high adrenaline moment when this happens. And just take a moment to recognize that there is no shame in it. It catches millions of people every year, and it's students and it's lecturers and it's tutors and it's parents and it's kids and it's everyone is can be prey or fall victim to these things. So please just be aware there's processes to step through. Don't panic, but also act with those scams, and they're changing and evolving all the time. So it's really just a matter of be aware of, start to gather what's legitimate, and always just take that time to stop, block anything that's unnecessary, that you really are uncomfortable or want to get rid of, and protect yourself. So look after yourself, look into it, go to the official pages, and ask for and reach out for help, please. And then into the housekeeping. So please put any of the last questions you've got in as you have them. And be aware, I see a great question come in. So I'll do this bit here and then jump into the questions. So on our website, which I mentioned before, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is here just literally for young people like yourself, including for uni students. So there's more detailed info, but it's written in a way that is designed for you to be able to work through in short, sharp, succinct manner. So these topics, all you need to do is create a free account on our website and you can access all of that info. There's little stuff with the rules of thumb on things to jog and help you remember things. And there's some little spending checklists and different things to help you out as you're navigating this Australian financial landscape. The other thing, if you really want to look a bit more at the particular elements of the Australian financial system, every school holidays, for school holidays, uni students holidays are different, but I've got the dates published on our website. I'm actually the teacher who is running short courses during each of those school breaks. So 4 times a year, I run a different one of these courses exploring something around that is relevant to young people in Australia in personal finance. So the next one is about getting your first job and managing that experience. And then we go into the more involved part of that in the next school holidays. So you can look on our website. It's called Cashed Up Holiday Hustle. We're doing the winter one next. And if that interests you, it tells you info about it, shoot me an email and you can jump in and join us for that as well. There's a bunch of videos on our YouTube channel that I mentioned that are animated ones that are 3 minutes or less, some much less, and talk about these topics specific to student questions. There's all of our contacts, and I'm about to get into questions, including the one that just came through. So let me just go through this one. All right, so I'll go through the questions that are in the chat first, then I'll go through to the frequent ones that we get. So the questions to clarify broad my understanding. Does the super fee depend on the provider we choose and the fees to pay for the service? Yeah, so to answer that one, every different fund will have their own schedule of fees and charges, and they will break down what that fees and charges is for. And in some instances, it is to pay for the service. In others, they have a breakdown of that it's a percentage of the amount you put in there that they invest on your behalf. If you sort of have a little bit of a good way of doing it is have a short list of the funds and then just check out that info for each fund that you're interested in, because there's so many funds available. I wouldn't suggest trying to look at every single one. Is the super money used by the providers to invest? Where does that super money sit? Yeah, so again, you'll be able to get the specifics of exactly what each fund does. A great question, but they're basically doing it as they manage the funds they manage the dollar value that is put into it for all of their members, and they make decisions based on your choices as a member. So when you create an account, register for a super fund, part of that process is you read through your options as to how much risk you're prepared to accept, how you might like that money to be invested, and the superannuation fund will go and make those decisions and include your money in with everybody else who's looking at similar decisions, and they will invest it as a group that they manage. I'm being really careful how I describe that. Again, trying to avoid that financial advice. And every super fund has their own specific way that they'll describe what they'll do with their money. Um, is a super insurance required? Is it normally paid by the employee or the employer? So when you have your superannuation fund, you can absolutely discuss with them that insurance. For instance, one of the insurances that is generally turned on by default is income protection insurance or life insurance. They're insurances people hold separate and on their own. So you can absolutely have that conversation about what insurances you want or don't want. Some of them will let you toggle those on and off as part of the sign up. Others you will have to contact them to go, here's the ones I want, here's the ones I don't. And that's your responsibility. Because your employee can't legally tell you what super fund to take, so they legally can't tell you what to do around your insurances in your super fund as well. All right, next one. We don't have to choose the super the employer uses, but will it inconvenience the employer or upset them if we suggest our preference? Look, it's a great question. I can't talk to your individual employer, but I have worked for a lot of people and helped a lot of other people with doing job applications and first day processes. In most instances, on the forms that you're filling out to start your job, it's literally either you tick the box to use their fund or you put in your own. And in most instances with employers, it's neither. For most of them, doesn't matter one way or another which way you choose to go. If you've got an employer who's really raising a fuss because you're not using their default fund, there is some links on the ATO website. There's a superannuation section where you can actually reach out to them via a little chat bubble, just to make sure that there's nothing untoward going on. The super on top of your salary is the 12% taxed. Yeah, it is. But for the specifics of the tax that applies to super, I know I keep saying look into it for particular funds, but it's that same deal. Look at it on the ATO website for superannuation, and you can also look at it on your individual funds as well. Is income tax different or the same for part-time versus full-time office roles? So that's a fantastic question. The The income tax brackets are the same for all of us in Australia. So which is always a nothing answer, but you're taxed based on your earnings. And that is whether you're part-time or full-time, and also whether you're casual. What you might notice though, and this is especially with like part-time and casual workers, your amount of tax you pay might change periodically because you might go and do like at the end of financial year, a lot of places will do stock take, or you might end up with like extra work that you pick up as a result of other employees, maybe full-time employees who are on holidays, and you'll find that sometimes, and again, depending on the way the paying software works, payroll software works, you might find there's periods where even though over the course of an entire year you don't, place yourself in a really high tax bracket, you might find in some of your pay slips you get taxed at a higher rate because it registers that if you earned that much money for the entire year, you should be paying, X amount of tax that's in that higher tax bracket. If you do end up in that situation, it's why you keep your pay slips. It's why you keep all of your records, because just like if you pay tax on your tax-free threshold, then you can claim that back as part of your tax return. You are able to go and address that as part of your tax return as well. That, there may have been times through the year due to different work circumstances where you were taxed at a higher rate. And there's a possibility that you can claim some of that back. Is income tax different? Oh, I did that one. And you're very welcome for the resources and the links. That was some fantastic questions. I'll actually copy and paste those questions into the YouTube video recording just so people can see what those questions were, and we'll jump to them as well. We already talked about the tax-free threshold, but just to reiterate, if it's your only job or your main job, yes, but you can only claim it for one. If you're really not sure, again, just reiterating what was right back at the start, contact the ATO, ask an income tax professional, e.g. an accountant if you have one, just remember that some of those services cost. Contacting the ATO does not. I've got those links. I've visited them several times, so I'm not going to reopen all of those. I've mentioned how you get access to everything on our website, and there's a whole bunch of stuff there, including like the little short courses you can do and get a little micro credential if you want that or need that at any point. You can get that as part of the holiday hustle programs. This PowerPoint, the reason it has been so text heavy is because, yes, you will be able to get a copy of it. I'll actually be sending it on to Study Adelaide, and it'll also be in the YouTube video description, so it'll be down there. The same as like a summary of the links as well. So this is what we covered. We went through, and thank you everyone who's been with us through the entirety of the session and the Q&A. If there's any more questions, we do have a few minutes left, so please do put them in. But we've been through the basics of the Australian banking system. We've looked at taxation basics. We've looked at superannuation basics, credit and debt. We looked at budgeting. We looked at money management. And we've looked at the useful free resources that are out there, specifically not just FBF ones, because we as a charity are interested in you having access to exactly what you need from a reputable source. And everything I've shown you here today have all been resources that are free, that you do not have to pay for. So please do check them out. And also, if you're at all concerned, do your due diligence. And if you have any further questions, please do put them in the YouTube video comments as well. But that's it for the session. I'll just give it another minute just to see if there's any more questions to come in. And otherwise, I'll just say thank you very much for taking the time to be here, for taking that interest. Good luck with all of your studies and your work and whatever it is that you're doing. And yeah, have a great rest of the week and enjoy the rest of your time in Australia if you are someone who's here for a brief stint and has plans to head home. If there's anything else we can do or that we can point you towards, leave us a message in the comments. And please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of the new content that's coming.